Hi everyone, it's Diana Nguyen here from Trinity Health and Living, and here is the promised video that I'd alluded to on Instagram to talk about the recent retreat that I went on probably about 3 weeks ago now. It was called the Give Back Take Back Retreat, run by the shamanic school where I was taught a lot of my shamanic techniques called One Tribe Healing, based over in Western Australia. But it was actually held over here on the east coast of Australia for the first time in a couple of years, actually, up in the northern Hunter Valley region. But before I kind of go into that a little bit, I wanted to explain the context around, I guess, the reason why I went on the Give Back Take Back retreat. So if you've been following me for a while, you might have seen a couple of my Instagram posts where I talk about the inner child and, certain thoughts and beliefs that the inner child might have taken on when they were younger, which then informs, how we act when we are older. So the inner child is the younger version of us, really, our subconscious. And so what happens, if we think about it, is when we're first born, we are really open, right? We're just babies. We don't really know one thing from another, and it takes us a number of years to be able, and through experience, to be able to figure out what is what and how to do things and all that sort of stuff. And so when we're really young, we're pretty much very, very dependent on the adults around us who are pretty much keeping us alive, giving us a home, a roof over our head, stability, giving us some stability there, giving us education, giving us food in our mouths, all that sort of stuff. And so the problem is that means that as a child, we actually don't really have a choice in things, and we don't really know that perhaps what we're being taught from our parents or whoever the adults are in our life at that point in time, it may or may not be the thing that we would want. So, for example, me growing up in an Asian family, it's kind of Asian culture to deny your emotions, not be very emotional about things at all. And it's very much, work hard. I'm telling you what to do because I know what's best for you, so just follow it. And if you don't, then you're going to get into trouble, all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure it's probably not just the Asian culture. I'm sure there's all other cultures where this kind of applies. But from my own perspective, because my background is from an Asian culture, a Vietnamese one, that's kind of what I was brought up in. And not only that, my parents ended up having a younger brother, 9 years younger than I was. And so then in some Asian cultures, there's such a lot of expectation that's placed on the eldest child to be able to, be responsible and look after things and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, that was pretty much all put on me. Not only that, the beliefs and the belief systems of my parents were really thrown at me, and put on me at that time during the formative years. And it's the same with every baby. The beliefs of their parents are always going to, in some ways, be put onto that baby and the child, just in how they're brought up, whether it's certain foods that they eat, or whether it's as a form of discipline, smacking is a good thing, or whatever. Or, for some people, they grew up in a very abusive household, and for them, that's normal, right? Everything for us that we experience is normal in our little paradigm because we don't actually have a reference. We don't have something else to compare it to. And so because of that, we're growing up and we don't really get this concept of, what we've been taught by our parents or church, religion or school or whatever might not actually be what we would prefer to believe when we're old enough to make that choice. And like it or not, a lot of the subconscious thoughts from our parents are really deeply embedded in us, so that, and really, they form the basis of a lot of decisions that we make as an adult. So for me personally, I've had, growing up in a very Catholic family, very Catholic Asian family, there was like the typical stuff around having to study very hard, having to have really good grades, becoming, a lawyer or a doctor or a dentist, one of those top three, which will make you a lot of money because money equals success. That was kind of how I was brought up. And then you're at the church on top where the teachings are, and I'm not, trying to diss the church. I'm just kind of saying how it was for me. The teachings are, no sex before marriage sort of thing. And you're a sinner and you have to repent for your sins and all this sort of stuff. And it wasn't only until I actually started on my own, spiritual journey and my career transition, most likely around 5 years ago or so. So that's when I started to question a lot of things. And by diving into it, I realized how much my parents' stuff I really had, and was working with that inner child for quite a lot. But then, push has kind of come to shove. And, this is probably a bit too much information for people, but it's my story, so I'm just going to share it anyway. But essentially, everything came to a head with my parents this year when I got engaged to the most amazing person. And I made the decision that I actually wasn't going to get married in a church, but I would rather have a shamanic wedding outdoors. And you can imagine the effect that had on my parents, who really were not happy with that. And I'm still trying to deal with the consequences of that decision for me because, for example, my father hasn't spoken to me for 2.5 months, and it's still counting since that time because it's something that's really against the church, for example. And so I felt like I really needed to finally do this give back, take back work to get rid of everything else that's been instilled from me from my parents. It took me, I'm 37 now, so it took me 37 years to finally stand up for myself. Finally realize who I am and stand up for myself against my parents, even though there was a lot of fear around the consequences of my actions, and that's playing out at the moment. So I went on this retreat, and I have to say it's the deepest work I've ever done, but it's really worth it. So yeah, essentially what happened, you go away for 3.5 days, no talking with other people for the majority of it. And it's pretty much going into and bringing up all of the emotions and the feelings around, the deepest patterns that you've taken from mum, deepest patterns that you've taken from dad, and even, any siblings, same thing. And then it goes into abuse, like sexual abuse or violence in the family and all that sort of stuff, like addictions, blah, 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 blah. You go into all of that and you get it out of your system. And, for some people, it's not for them because it is very cathartic. It's like, you're screaming, you're crying, you're dry retching, like you're getting to the point, you get close to the point of vomiting sort of thing. But because those sorts of, beliefs are so deeply embedded in us, like, and I would say, when I mean deeply, it's like DNA deep sort of thing. Sometimes the only way to get it out, the only way to shift it is something like that, like something like going into a cathartic episode to be able to shift it. And for me, it was amazing because the One Tribe family, Mark is the main facilitator, and then Sharon was helping. They held the space so well, and I could feel a lot of things were coming up around my mom, my dad, my brother, and even my ancestors, even my whole cultural heritage that I'd taken on. And, for me, I always say it's really difficult for you to be able to shift something if you don't necessarily know what it is on a conscious level. And so there was a lot of stuff coming up, but consciously I wasn't actually sure what that was. And it was fantastic to have someone like Mark or Sharon, because they'd come right up next to me and they would be speaking it out. And as soon as they spoke it out, it made so much sense and allowed me to keep going. So yeah, it was really intense, but definitely worth it. And I kind of, I have to I'd recommend this for everyone to do, because we all have those deep patterns. Whether it's the deep pattern of, say, I'm not worthy. That's one that came from my dad, for example. And that's why the whole control aspect comes in. Or, I'm not lovable, or like really deep beliefs like that. We can get rid of them by really going into a deep healing like we did during the One Tribe retreat. So, yeah, highly recommend it. In terms of integration, and so for me, the word integration means when you can finally see the results of the healing, i.e. before this whole thing, every single time I was around my parents, I get really triggered by them. Like, the fact that my dad's not talking to me would really shit me to tears, really. And then my mum being so unemotional would also piss me off. But I actually went down and I saw them last week, and I didn't get that feeling anymore. It was just like, it was an acceptance of, okay, that's them, that's who they are. I can't change them, but I've done what I could to change myself and to heal myself around it. And so it's kind of like, well, they'll eventually turn around. They'll eventually come around. I feel that they will, but it's just like no point in, being irritated or anything about it, because they've got to go through their own process, sort of thing. But the really interesting thing for me about the integration was literally the next 2 days in the evening, my whole body developed rashes and hives and stuff. And it was really like red and angry. And I will go to bed and then the next day it'll be gone. But then it'll come back at night. And so the good thing with One Tribe again is, like, Mark's very open to having you chat to him afterwards, because, like, he wants to make sure that everything is okay with you. And so he dived in again with me separately and realized that some of the source of the rashes was actually this whole concept of control, but taking it even further in terms of the concept of ownership. Like, my dad was saying that he owned me, almost like owned me like a commodity, right? But then it turned out in all of my other, like, there was a lot of other past lives where other people had staked their claim on ownership of me too. So that was kind of coming out in these hives. So then we kind of shifted that. And then I woke up the next day, and then in the evening, 95% of the rashes was gone. And then there was 5% remaining. So Mark, checked in again. He's like, oh, you're in a child. Do you feel like you can actually fully forgive your parents? And, as an adult, it's easy to rationalize, yes, you can forgive. But when I checked in with my inner child, she wasn't happy. She was very stubborn. She didn't want to do it. And I wasn't too sure why. I'd ask her, but I wouldn't get a response. And so I then actually went to a kinesiologist chiropractor who helped me figure out what that was. And so it's been 2 weeks where the rashes haven't come back. So sometimes the integration can be like that. Or quick like that as well. But for others, it might take a while, because energetically we've actually gotten a lot of gunk out of us. And so the last place for it to actually show up or do the healing is physically. Some people, it can go on for years. Other people, it can just go on for, like me, I guess a few days. But I'm pretty sure I'm still integrating a lot of what's going on. But I think because I have done a lot of healing around the acid, those areas, plus it's just in my nature to shift through things quite quickly, that I was able to handle that sort of thing. So yeah, I would highly recommend you do it. Now it's not official yet, but I'm pretty sure there will be another Give Back Take Back retreat held in the Hunter Valley next year in May. That's going to be big. There's going to be a lot of people there. I went to one which was just 15 people. This one's probably going to be 60, 65 people or so. And there'll be a lot of shamanic practitioners who will be there to assist in the facilitation of it. But it's almost like, if you do it, you're healing not only your ancestors and your generations past, but also going into the future as well. And, especially if you're looking to have children or something, I'd highly recommend you do it, because when you do this, you get rid of all of that crap, all that ancestral crap that you came in with, and you're not letting it go onto your child. So your child has a better chance at a more, I guess, happier life. So yeah, if you've got any questions, just feel free to reach out to me, whether it's by email or direct message or whatever, and I'm more than happy to chat to you about it. But once again, the retreat's run by One Tribe Healing, and I think it's onetribehealing.com.au that you'll be able to find that. And also, with me in shamanic healing sessions, if the energy calls for it, then I'll be taking you through some of that work too. It's just less intense when you do it with me, because you're only with me for an hour or an hour and a half, as opposed to actually going through the process pretty much like back to back for at least 2.5 full-on days. So you can imagine you can get really tired after that. But yeah, I hope that kind of gave you a bit of insight into Give Back Take Back retreat and the reasons why. And once again, if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, bye.